Hi everybody, welcome back on Lit Up with Annie. This session we are going to talk about the Renaissance in the history of literature in English, particularly the English Renaissance. It began somewhere else and it reached England, and that's what we are going to focus on. Renaissance marks the changed world. Everything changed, from people's faith, religion, to the long held faiths that people had in their minds regarding so many things. It changed, and Renaissance marks that change, rebirth of learning, we can say. On one hand, we can say that the world was changing for something better, for something new, and on the other hand, we can also say that change is never good at first. People don't like change, people resist changes. So yes, it came as a shock also for many people, Renaissance. So we're talking about the beginning of Tudor reigns. हमने बात किया था Tudors जब आए reign करने, and in the last session Henry VIII, that's where I stopped, and I said that I will begin from Henry VIII in the session to come. So by the end of 1400s, Chaucer के बाद, age of Chaucer के बाद, the world was already changing. And particularly if we have to talk about the Renaissance, there are two dates which really mark some big changes. The first is, two key dates that I'm talking about. One of them is 1485. 1485, we already talked about War of Roses, civil wars जो थी इंग्लैंड में, छोटी छोटी civil wars, जिसकी वजह से remember two houses were fighting कि कौन राजा बनेगा. So it ended in 1485. So after 1485, printing was invented in England, and this is a very important date, very important landmark. William Caxton came, and William Caxton issued the first imaginative book in England. It was Sir Thomas Malory's retelling of Arthurian legends. It was called Les Morts d'Arthur. So this is one big thing. The second date is 1492. 1492, because Christopher Columbus, you've all heard the name of Christopher Columbus. He took a voyage to the Americas. So when he went, he saw the world and he talked about it. Eyes opened to the existence of new world. People were more curious now. You remember we talked about Mandeville's travels in the age of Chaucer, and I told you that although this is much fiction, but still this is a very important text, because people were very curious to know that what lies beyond our lands. And finally Christopher Columbus took that voyage to Americas and to the existence of new world. The eyes were opened. 1492. So these two are very important dates, 1485 and 1492. I'll go back to the previous slide now. Now for most scholars, Renaissance, it begins with the rise of Tudor dynasty, 1485 to 1603, and it reaches its cultural summit. मतलब कब वो peak पे था Renaissance? It was during Queen Elizabeth I, from 1558 to 1603. Very important years for England. So यहाँ पे इस time पे it was at the peak. It extends into the reigns of the Stuarts also. Sometimes this is where it reaches its peak, but it doesn't end here. It also extends to the reign of the Stuarts. Stuarts कौन थे? King James the First आते हैं 1603 में till 25. Remember King's Square? And perhaps that of Charles the First. Sometimes some scholars say that we can also extend it till the time of Charles the First, till 1649. So this is about the dates of Renaissance. Back to the two key dates. Now, when we're talking about the Renaissance and I'm talking about the New World, it was not just the New World geographically. because Columbus chale gaye, New World ढूंढा, तो geographically things were expanding, but it was also very spiritual in nature. And both these changes, both these new things, geographically and spiritually, they are key to Renaissance. Rebirth हो रहा था क्योंकि of learning and culture. People were learning new things and the culture was also expanding. It reached its peak in Italy in the early 16th century and Britain में अपने peak पे पहुंचा during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, that is 1558 से 1603. Now Tudors की अगर हम बात करें, as I said that it probably began with Tudors when Tudors came to the throne. So we talk about Henry VIII. Henry VIII का जो reign था, it started from 1509 and it went on till 1547. Henry VIII, see, every time when we talk about a king, the concern is about the heir. After the king will die, who will take the throne? Does the king have an heir? तो हेनरी VIII का कोई heir नहीं था. 6 बार उन्होंने शादी किया. He got married 6 times, but hard luck, he had 6 wives that could only give him 1 son and 2 daughters total. Otherwise, all these other kings had 14 children, 12 children. Henry VIII only 3 children, 1 son out of them and 2 daughters. Of course, he was wanting a son. That is why he got married 6 times. But I think whatever happens for good, because one of the daughters was Queen Elizabeth the First. And I think कोई हेनरी, कोई एडवर्ड, कोई एलिजाबेथ के आगे कोई भी नहीं है. It's all Queen Elizabeth. Even I think non-literature students would also know about Queen Elizabeth, right? Who were the children? Edward. One was Edward, one was Queen Mary and the other was Queen Elizabeth. अब क्या हुआ कि Henry VIII wanted that उनकी जो first marriage थी, it was to Catherine of Aragon. He wanted it to end. Annulment, आप जानते हैं ना कि रद्द कर दी जाए शादी, annul हो जाए शादी. तो वो चाहते थे. लेकिन चर्च उस चीज़ की इजाज़त नहीं दे रहा था. The church was not allowing Henry VIII to annul his marriage. That is why Henry got into a direct conflict with the Catholic Church. उनकी लड़ाई हो गई Catholic Church के साथ. And especially with this Pope Clement III. तो reaction में क्या हुआ? Henry took a very, very big step. And he said that I will end the rule of Catholic Church altogether. Just imagine. It's a very, very big step. Catholic Church was in rule from a very long time. And because Henry VIII was the ruler, he was the king, he could do anything. That was the power of the king. Because he got into conflict with the Catholic Church, he said, I'm going to end the rule of Catholic Church altogether in England. And this moment, whatever this happened, this change, it is called what? Reformation. आप सबको रेफॉर्मेशन के बारे में पता है. तो क्या था रेफॉर्मेशन? ये था जो चेंज हुआ कैथलिक चर्च से, अब प्रोटेस्टेंट चर्च आ गया. दिस वॉज कॉल्ड रेफॉर्मेशन. सो दिस इज रेफॉर्मेशन एंड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट हिस्टोरिकल मोमेंट. तो इससे क्या हुआ? हेनरी VIII बिकेम द हेड, सब चीज़ों का हेड बन गया. चर्च का हेड बन गया एंड ही बिकेम द हेड ऑफ द स्टेट. ही वॉज ऑलरेडी द किंग. It was all Henry VIII now, everything. Now just imagine what impact will this have on the people? People who had strong belief in the priests, right, in the church. It was a shock for them. Because till now, the closest person to God was the priest or the Pope, let's say. But now, because of Reformation, who became the defender of faith? The king. तो लोगों को जब फेथ हिलता है ना, तो शॉक लगता है लोगों को कि अब तक हम इतने टाइम से एक चीज़ बिलीव कर रहे थे विदाउट क्वेश्चनिंग. वी हैड दिस बिलीफ दैट priest is the closest human being to God. But earlier this was the role given to the Pope. But now England became Protestant. And entire nation's political and religious identity had to be redefined. अगर पोप नहीं तो कौन है? Now if we talk about Protestantism शुरुआत कैसे हुआ था? जस्ट देखो, नाम में ही प्रोटेस्ट है. It originated with Martin Luther's 95 thesis in Germany 1517 में इन्होंने लिखा था. Martin Luther wrote this 95 thesis. There were 95 ideas basically to stop corruption. Everybody, remember we talked about Wycliffe also. Everybody was talking about the corruption of the church, Catholic Church mein. And there were many people talking about it. Martin Luther also wrote 95 theses. And the ideas of Protestantism began from here. What it believed was that we, common people, we don't need a priest, let's say, or the ideas given by them for us to have faith in something. We are to define our faiths by ourselves. And we can read the Bible, the scripture. That was the belief of Protestantism. And the funny part, or I would say the interesting part also, is that Henry VIII did this big change, right? He changed the entire faith of the country. But he remained Catholic himself. Yeah. So everything changed, but he remained Catholic. Therefore, what happened, एक कुछ mixture सा हो गया. Catholicism और Protestantism का mixture सा बन गया. And ultimately, this was the beginning of Anglicism also. आपने ये सारे terms सुने होंगे. Protestantism, Anglicism. So that was the beginning of Anglicism also. Now, if we are to talk about this Henry VIII's break with this Roman Catholic Church, this was not an isolated rebellion. ऐसा नहीं है कि एक दिन हेनरी VIII की लड़ाई हुई तो उन्होंने बस सीधा ये आइडिया उनके दिमाग में आया that let's change everything. It was not an isolated rebellion. We can talk about two great philosophers, great scholars who were also, somehow responsible for this break with Rome. The first one is Erasmus. Yeah, Erasmus. He was a Dutch scholar, very, very enthusiastic for classical literature. So, enthusiasm for classical literature was a major source for the revival of classical learning. इनका जो enthusiasm था for classical literature, this became a source for the revival of classical learning. He wrote this work, Praise of Folly. And in this work, Praise of Folly, he talks about the narrowness of Catholic monasticism. And this contempt for the narrowness of Catholic monasticism, it was not an attempt to deny the authority of Pope. No. He was not saying that I don't believe in Pope or Pope should not be there. This was not to deny the authority of Pope, but he was actually challenging the corruption of Catholic Church. ठीक है? तो इन्होंने ऐसा नहीं कहा कि Catholic Church को हटा दो. Erasmus ने ऐसा नहीं कहा. He was just challenging the corruption altogether. It is becoming very, very corrupt. So yes, that was a challenge to the corruption of the Catholic Church. All he wished was to return to the value of early Christian church. कि एक वो value था जो पहले, there was no corruption. Let's go back to that. That was his wish. That is why he produced a Greek edition of scriptures in place of the existing Latin one also. It was just a step जो इन्होंने लिया to do something. When he came to England, see, he was a Dutch scholar, Erasmus. England आए एक बार और Sir Thomas Malory से मिले. Have you heard the name of Thomas More? Utopia, Thomas More? उनसे इनकी मुलाकात हुई इंग्लैंड में. And do you know that Thomas More was beheaded? And the reason was that because Thomas More did not agree with Henry VIII's annulment of marriage, divorce from Catherine of Aragon. तो उस चीज़ पे टॉमस मोर अग्रीड नहीं थे हेनरी VIII के साथ. So because he did not support Henry VIII, he was executed, he was beheaded, Thomas More. The next scholar is Martin Luther again, German Martin Luther. Now, he agreed with much of what Erasmus said. Yes, that there is a lot of corruption in the church and we need to reform that. But there was a difference of opinion at one point. And what was that? पोप की अथॉरिटी. इरास्मस ने कहा कि मुझे कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है पोप की अथॉरिटी से. मार्टिन लूथर को प्रॉब्लम थी. He said, I don't want any authority of Pope. I don't want anyone to tell me that this is something that I should believe in, this is something that I should do. I am responsible for myself. मैं अपने लिए खुद तय करूँगा मुझे क्या करना है. So that was Martin Luther's philosophy. And as I said, 95 Theses, the full name was 95 Theses Against the Sale of Papal Indulgences. And this, sometimes is the start of Reformation and the birth of Protestantism, as I said. तो ये जो continuous opposition था मार्टिन लूथर का पोप के खिलाफ, it led to his excommunication in 1521. ठीक है. एंड एज आई सेड एंग्लिकानिज्म भी वहीं से शुरू हुआ. ये जो हेनरी VIII का अडॉप्शन था ऑफ द रोल ऑफ द हेड ऑफ द चर्च, इंग्लैंड का चर्च, एंड द डिफरेंट स्टाइल ऑफ चर्च ऑल्सो, इट वॉज अ स्टाइल ऑफ एंग्लिकानिज्म. सो लेटर ऑन ये जो लूथर का मिशन था मार्टिन लूथर का, इट वॉज टेकन अप बाय जीन कैल्विन. कैल्विन का नाम भी आपने शायद सुना हो. कैल्विनिज्म यहाँ से आता है. ही वॉज अ फ्रेंच मैन. ही टुक अप द आइडियाज ऑफ मार्टिन लूथर एंड इवन ही बिलीव्ड दैट बाइबल शुड बी द लिटरल वर्ड, Bible that is the literal word of God, that should be followed, and that was the foundation of his ideas also. After that, Geneva became the powerhouse of Protestantism. Over the next century or so, okay, so these were the two scholars, Erasmus, Martin Luther, who were also somewhere responsible for the rebellion of Henry VIII's break with Roman Catholic Church. तो एक तो ये शॉक हो गया, और हाउ द वर्ल्ड वॉज चेंजिंग, द रेनेसां. नेक्स्ट सेंचुरी में और धक्के लगे लोगों को. वी हैड टू मोर नेम्स, कॉर्पेनिकस एंड गैलीलियो. गैलीलियो तो सुना होगा. सो दे वुड डू देयर ओन इन्वेंशंस एंड पीपल वुड गो इनटू मोर शॉक. Oh, we believed that the sun was going around the earth and so many other things. But these people would scientifically establish that earth was not the center of universe. Earlier this was believed that earth was the center of universe, sun उसके चक्कर लगा रहा है. फिर पता लगा कि अच्छा sun तो खड़ा है, earth चक्कर लगा रही है. तो again starting में people did not believe, इन लोगों को भी बहुत opposition मिली. लोगों ने पागल बुलाया, कहते पागल हैं ये लोग, कुछ भी बोल रहे हैं. लिटरेचर की अगर अब हम बात करें तो लिटरेचर बिफोर रेनेसां, इट वुड ऑलवेज टॉक अबाउट द आइडियल पैटर्न्स ऑफ लिविंग एंड इट वॉज डोमिनेटेड बाय द ईथोस ऑफ द चर्च. लेकिन रेफॉर्मेशन के बाद ऑब्वियसली इट चेंज्ड. फेथ लोगों का हिल गया, बहुत कुछ हिल गया, तो everything changed, even literature changed. So after Reformation, research for individual expression and meaning took over. ठीक है. One another important concept of Renaissance is humanism. Because now वो जो faith था as a priest or a pope closest to God and everything, it started changing and people started focusing on the human being. So human being becoming the center of everything. So humanism का भी यहाँ पे birth होता है. Later on of course it was all opposed, but that's far away right now. Before this slide, let's talk a little bit more. ये जो Reformation हुआ, it gave so much to the Renaissance writing. Writers had a lot of things to write now, culturally, philosophically, ideologically, a lot of impetus to English Renaissance writing. The writers in the century which followed the Reformation, they had to explore and redefine all the concerns of humanity. In this world, जहाँ पे अभी पुराने assumptions were no longer valid, right? Scientific discoveries हो रही थी अलग अलग. Man rather than God was the center of interest now. So it was writers who reflected and attempted to respond to the disintegration of former certainties. पहले जो लोगों ने certainly believe कर लिया था, वो चीज़ें अब change हो रही थी. So it was the work of the writers to write about it and talk about it, or help people cope with these things, these changes. So as I said, fourth decade जो था 16th century का, उसमें Copernicus आए, Aristotle का जो system था पुराना कि that sun was going around, it was changed by Copernicus, and he said that it's the other way around. There was another person, Harvey, 1628 में उन्होंने blood circulation की बात की. That concept was also not there that हमारी body में blood circulate करता है. तो नई नई चीज़ें आ रही थी. उसके बाद if we talk about 17th century, so many new things, development, clocks आ गई, telescope आए, thermometers came, compass came, then microscopes, all these different instruments were designed to measure and investigate the world. And this is how, things were changing. That is why this age is called Renaissance. So much learning, so many changes. And remember that Renaissance एक छोटा एज नहीं है, ठीक है? हमने फर्स्ट स्लाइड में ही देखा. Renaissance is big. Elizabethan age, Jacobean age, वो सब Renaissance के अंदर ही आता है. Okay? Also, another thing that I missed is Henry VIII, as I said that he changed things. He remained Catholic himself. तो हलचल मच गई पूरे देश में. After that, Queen Mary came. Queen Mary ने क्या किया? Catholicism को reinstate कर दिया कि Catholicism will come back. दोबारा it was chaos in the entire country. Many people left the country, And then Elizabeth came, Elizabeth I. And Protestantism was reinstated, but there was more religious tolerance in the age of Elizabeth. Both Catholics and Protestants lived with cooperation. लेकिन ये जो changes हुए in the church, इससे क्या हुआ एक टाइम पे that groups बन गए. Separatists, non-separatists. Separatists कौन थे? जो चर्च से सेपरेट हो गए. जैसे हमने बात की ना इनकी इरास्मस की एंड मार्टिन लूथर की. सेपरेटिस्ट नॉन सेपरेटिस्ट के बिलीव्स जो थे, दे वर ऑलमोस्ट द सेम, बट इट डिफर्ड एट सम पॉइंट. सेपरेटिस्ट चर्च से बिल्कुल सेपरेट हो गए एंड नॉन सेपरेटिस्ट चर्च से बिल्कुल सेपरेट नहीं हुए. दे जस्ट वांटेड रिफॉर्म, दे वांटेड दैट दिस corruption should not be there. We know them as Puritans. आपने Puritans की बात सुना होगा. I mean, you must have read in the history, Puritans, the so-called very strict people. Well, we'll talk about them in the next sessions. So yes, this is how Puritans came into existence. Existence. They already existed, but the Puritan name was given to them. Okay. The major writers of this age. We have the greatest name in all world literature, Renaissance. That's why a very important age. Drama, Shakespeare, Marlowe, Webster, Johnson. In the poets, we have Sidney Spencer, John Donne, Milton. In the prose writers, we have Bacon, Thomas Nash, Raleigh, Brown, Hooker. And of course, we also have the authorized version of Bible, 1611, King James the First. I have not written down all, of course, but these are the greatest names that we could talk about in English Renaissance. Okay. Apart from all of this, we have some other historical dates or historical moments that happened in this time. One is the 5th November 1605 Guy Fawkes gunpowder plot. And we have Elizabeth's एक time पे उनका favorite हुआ करता था, Earl of Essex, led a plot against his monarch, which considerably unsettled the entire political climate of by the end of the century. Then we had Spanish Armada, 1588. I'm not going into detail right now in these dates. Yeah, you can write down. 1576, we had the foundation of public theatre, and stage became the forum of debate. Whatever issues they had to discuss, stage पे जाके discuss किया जाता था. ठीक है. So yeah, that was about some of the historical background, historical context of the Renaissance. And abhi Renaissance chalega. So in the next session, I will continue with even the literary part of the Renaissance. I hope this much is clear to you. If there's any doubt, please ask me in the comment section. You can join our Telegram channel also. I will put the link in the description box. And please share the video, please like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that as of now. Thank you. I will see you in the next session.